Next up is Howard Altschuler with Weaver. Thank you.
I'm Howard Altschuler, and I lead up the real estate and construction practice at Weaver. For those of you who don't know, Weaver is a full-service CPA firm. We have about 1,000 people in 14 offices coast to coast, and about 150 people here in Dallas with our office over on West 7th. We also have a card that's on everybody's desk, so feel free to, everyone's chair, excuse me, so feel free to take one home with you. I do see a lot of our clients in the room, and I also hope to see a lot of future clients in the room. All right, I want to give a shout out to Very. Very has been gracious enough to provide for us the seating here, so want to thank them for doing that. So we also have a treat for y'all today. There's two men here whose work I respect very much. They're leaders in Fort Worth, and we've invited them to join us today for a conversation about Fort Worth and Tarrant County, along with some of the things that make Fort Worth the place we know and love. Hopefully, they'll also break out their crystal balls and talk about some exciting things for the future as well. So please join me in welcoming Mike Berry, the president at Hillwood Properties and Hillwood Urban, and John Goff, chairman of Crescent Real Estate, they're already on the stage, for what will be a very interesting conversation.
All right. Thank you, Howard. Appreciate it. We've got 10 minutes left, so I've got to take my 7 topics that I wanted to talk about with you today, John, and condense them. I might run over a little bit because I don't want to. I want to hear a few things that I know you have to talk about. Just for everyone's to level set with the audience, I think most everyone knows John Goff and knows of Crescent, but you probably don't understand the breadth of his businesses. I actually told someone the other day that I was going to be doing this interview with John at the Real Estate Forecast, and they described John as a conglomerate, which he truly is. I mean, he's not just a real estate guy. He's got a breadth of businesses, and many of you may know that he's also, in addition to chairman and co-founder of Crescent Real Estate, John is also the chairman of Goff Capital, which has got a multitude of businesses that they invest in and sectors, and also is chairman of Crescent Energy, which is a publicly traded energy company that he merged. He took Contango, his company, and KKR, and they merged into a bigger enterprise a couple of years ago. So he's got a lot going on and has a view of really, I think, the macro economy that very few people have. So I wanted to touch on that. But he also has an amazing career path, and it started right here in Fort Worth. So I want to ask John to maybe just walk through your career path. Go back to, you go to University of Texas with an anticipation of being an electrical engineer, and sort of you change direction, and talk about that and walk forward to your path to Fort Worth.
Sure, I'll give you the Cliff Note version. Grew up in a small town on the coast, Lake Jackson. Lake Jackson was built by Dow Chemical, where my dad worked at the chemical plant to house its workers. And virtually everybody worked either for Dow or a contractor of Dow. Great place to grow up, but I was ready as heck to get out of there and see my way, hopefully, around the world. Went to the University of Texas. I studied electrical engineering because I needed help and monetarily to get through school. And Dow had this great program where they would pay for the bulk of your school, really all of the school, if you agreed to work with them when you got out, or they had the hopes that you would join them as an engineer. We had a shortage of engineers back then, as we still do today. So I studied electrical engineering, and then in like my 3rd year of interning with them in the summer, I got to interface with a lot of business people on a plant they were building in Brazil. And I realized in that one meeting, I was on the side of the table with a bunch of engineers, and on the other side were these business people who were trying to finance this project. And I realized, just like a light bulb went off, I'm on the wrong side of the table. I want to be over there. So I went back to school. I changed my major. I got an accounting degree. UT, even back then, had the #1 accounting program in the nation, and I had to cram all of that business school stuff in a very short period of time because I couldn't I couldn't extend my college. I did extend by 1 semester, but anyway, got out with an accounting degree, moved to Houston, was in public accounting, and got hired by our largest client, which was a man named Kenneth Schnitzer, who was one of the largest developers in the nation. And at the time, every project was in Houston, Texas. Houston was on fire. You know, it was the oil capital of the world back then, and as it still is. And I got to do a lot of things with him in the real estate space that I had no business doing. I was young, pretty naive, but he was a wonderful guy to work with. And then I got married. Wife didn't want to live in Houston. She was from Fort Worth, so moved up here. So that was 1981. I came up here with no money. I was driving a pickup truck and drove a U-Haul trailer up here to move in. And went to work for, at the time, Pete Marwick, now KPMG, which was an important office for the firm because they had the Bass brothers as their primary account, along with Alcon and some other big companies. And ultimately, I got to know Richard Rainwater, who was Chief Investment Officer at the Basses, and I worked with him day in, day out for quite a period of time while I was at Pete Marwick. And then when he left the Basses in '86, he called me and says, John, I want you to come join me. I'm going to open up a little office, and we'll kind of figure it out. I did that, had no idea what I was even going to get paid. It didn't matter. I was just...
Good client to go to work for. I'd do that deal.
So I went to work for him, and lo and behold, I didn't get paid very much, but it ultimately worked out. So that's how I got to work with Richard. And we did a lot of primarily oil and gas related investing. I did a lot of distressed debt investing early on, as well as healthcare. We helped Rick Scott get his company up and running, which was Columbia Healthcare, which was an amazing run. Incredible guy who worked as hard as any. He and I were always the first ones in and the last ones to leave. But it was an amazing collection of people. Now, along with Rick Scott, we had Eddie Lampert, you've probably heard of, who took over Sears, not really successfully, but took over Sears. We had Mort Meyerson, who had sold, EDS to General Motors, and then we helped George W. Bush buy the Rangers, and so he officed with us for a good period of time.
And Roger Staubach.
And then Roger Staubach. And Staubach introduction was really very fortuitous for me. I loved him. He was I idolized the guy as a young man. And he came over and he was in trouble because he had invested in a lot of real estate in the 80s and was looking for help. And Richard said, well, talk to John and we'll see what we can do. And we weren't going to give him money, but what I did is went and just helped him work out of quite a few bad real estate deals, and I just helped in those negotiations. Roger was amazing in doing that. He was really, he was so forthright, so honest, acted with such integrity, and we really got to know each other very well. And at the end of cleaning up that mess, I said, Roger, first, don't ever invest in another real estate deal. And second, you've got an amazing ability to execute this tenant rep business. And he was doing a little of that at the time, and they were doing about $5 million in revenues, about $1 million in cash flow, and I said, we would love, I hadn't even talked to Richard about it, but I said, we'd love to own part of the company, and I'll help you grow it. So literally over lunch on a napkin, I penciled out a deal that we'd buy 20% of the business for $1 million. And Richard was like, why are we messing with anything this small? And the reason was I didn't have a lot of money, and by that time I could own a meaningful part of the $1 million, so it was important to me. And I thought Roger was going to be very successful. Well, fast forward, two things happened. Ultimately, he sold out to Jones Lang LaSalle for a big number, about $750 million. So that 20% became worth a lot of money. And probably even more importantly for me, is I served on the board for quite a few years, and I got this unique insight as to where companies were moving and why. And here we were with all these companies they were representing moving in primarily into the Sun Belt and specifically a lot into Texas, but it was the most overbuilt region in the country. So there wasn't a lot of other things interesting going on at the time. This was early 2000s. So I went to Richard with a plan, literally on a yellow pad, and I mapped out a plan to build a real estate company. And Richard said, love the idea, but you're gonna have to put up your entire net worth, and I'll back you at some level. So I did, naively, and at the time, I had built a little net worth. I probably had $5 or $6 million to my name, but I had to put it all up, and I did, and ultimately was able to scratch and claw and buy enough assets to go public in May of '94 as Crescent Real Estate.
So I fast forward to 2007. Real estate market was, you'd built a huge portfolio, great success. Real estate market was at its peak, and you started looking at the state of the market, the value of your assets, and
We were getting offers on virtually every asset in our portfolio at the time at prices that I just didn't understand. I'm not about to say I was smart enough to see what was about to happen, but I just felt like the world was overpriced. And I had this natural buyer in Morgan Stanley. They loved our portfolio, they loved the management team, and we worked out a deal for them to buy us. I took it to the board, and the board actually tried to talk me out of it. But I was the largest shareholder in the room, and I said, look, I'm just telling you, I feel it in my gut, it's time to sell. So ultimately we coalesced and got that transaction done. August 3rd, 2007, and I count my blessings every day.
You got a couple of wine bottles in a special place that have that date marked on them, I'm sure.
Yes, I do.
One that you drank on that day, and probably one that you drink every August 3rd.
Absolutely.
So between that day, August 3rd, 2007, and a couple of years later, sort of what did you do, and then what came back around?
Well, I started Goff Capital, and I started investing, created a family office, started investing in a variety of things, just like I did with Richard, and a lot of it in the public markets. I also had created a debt business where we were buying distressed debt and really ramped that up in all real estate related. And then I got a call from Barclays, who had financed for Morgan Stanley the purchase. They put up, it was a $6.5 billion sale in 2007. Barclays financed $3.7 billion of that, and Morgan Stanley put up $1.1 billion of equity, which was nowhere near enough. You just can't run real estate on that kind of leverage.
Right.
So I had the chance to buy it back, and I did that in partnership with Barclays in November 2009.
The best two real estate deals in that period of time, the sale and then the repurchase. And that's what you want to do. You always want to buy assets back that you know better than anyone else.
Timing is everything.
Timing is everything. Okay, so we're going to come back to Crescent because I want to talk about Fort Worth and other projects that you're doing, but let's go big picture for a second. I know you watch a lot of economic indicators, and you're very focused on data tracking, and I know population demographics are a big area that you spend a lot of time with, but if you were just trying to distill, and I don't want you to sort of forecast where the economy's going so much as just to tell everyone sort of the big macro indicators that you stay focused on, and sort of with these conflicting data sets that we're seeing right now, sort of how do you reconcile where we are?
Well, I learned something from Richard that was very simple but somewhat profound. And Richard made the comment to me one day. He said, your investment decisions ought to be made off the front page of the paper, not the business section. And so, and I have to admit, I'm a geek. I love data, and I look at a lot of data. And the one most profound piece of data that affects everybody here, perhaps more than any, is population growth. And the real estate industry oddly doesn't talk about it a lot. We talk about migration, that's very important, but population growth overall is critical. If you look, this nation historically has grown by about 1% a year. If you look at 2021, I have to say I was a bit frightened. We grew at 0.1%. It's the lowest since the beginning of the United States, the lowest. Last year, 2022, we grew by 0.4%, so a little better, but not our historical norm.
So do you think that's millennials aren't having kids early enough, pandemic impacts?
Terrible immigration policies by our government,
Right.
A, and B, birth rate is way down. And of course, our death rate has been accelerated somewhat for obvious reasons. But at that 0.4%, that's like 1.4 million people. So where are they going? Now, our society's homogenous, so I'm not saying all of them went to the South, but the South gained more than that population growth. I'm talking about the South ex-California. California lost population. So Texas was the biggest gainer, and Texas gained close to 500,000 people last year. That is very important. So if you look forward, the best predictors I've seen, and I'm not saying these are accurate, but if you look at what the population growth is projected to be between now and 2030, we're going to add about 18.4 million people in the United States. So what is that? That's the equivalent of 2.5 times all of Fort Worth, all of Dallas, all of Houston, all of San Antonio, and all of Austin. 2.5 times between now and 2030. So I would tell you that I think we're all in the real estate business in some capacity in here. It's going to be profound. It's going to be a good period to be in that business. But you've got to be in the right spots. So we monitor a lot of demographic data. I mean, I go all the way down to U-Haul data. I looked at U-Haul yesterday. It costs 3 times as much to rent a 15-foot truck to go from San Francisco to Dallas than it does to go from Dallas to San Francisco, because all the trucks are over here and they need them back into San Francisco. They'll almost pay you to take them back.
Texas is the #1 U-Haul inbound state so given that, and I'm 100% on board, let's talk about the Texas economy and sort of the Texas story. Where do we stand right now? What are our challenges going forward to continue to accept that kind of growth that's coming our way?
Education is probably #1, #2, and #3. We've got to improve this educational system in the state, and we definitely need to be doing that here in our home court. It's critical, and I mean, Mike, you and I have talked a million times about this, and we've both tried to do our part in helping. But that's critical. Infrastructure obviously is very critical, but keeping the state with, look, we're the beneficiary of the Central Time Zone. We've got great airports, and that system is very good. But infrastructure is going to be a big challenge for us. We got a lot of work to do to stay on top of this growth. And then, obviously, the political climate's very important. If we want to continue to grow, we're going to have to accept that we continue with, in general, the current policy making. I have leaned hard on the state to utilize the biggest asset we have as a state, and that asset is we have a AAA credit rating. Our credit rating in the state of Texas is better than the United States of America. A lot of people don't realize that. So what I've tried to do is push to go sell 100-year bonds. It's never been done, but I think we could do it as a state. So think about if we were to go sell 100-year bonds and use that money to really ramp up our school systems and our infrastructure. It would be amazing, a game changer. But that's
we're going into the
one man's
session.
opinion.
We're going into the session with $32 billion surplus. You would think that we could take some of that, and I love that idea of 100-year bonds, but we should really be more proactive in taking the rainy day money and the surplus money and really thinking strategically about investing in infrastructure, both human and physical. Okay, So, and I don't know what our time limits are now that we're sort of over the clock, but there's a lot of other stuff that I'd like to cover. So from Texas, let's go down to our market, which you know a lot of markets around the country, but you certainly know the North Texas market best. And for those of you who don't maybe follow all the things that Crescent has done, I mean, if you look at Crescent's work and John's work in Dallas and Uptown Dallas, where we also do business, I mean, the McKinney and Olive project is really an iconic development and also a very successful exit, by the way, I think.
Thank you.
The Crescent, which was one of his original assets, Crescent Hotel, Crescent Complex, office project, just iconic. Your Ritz-Carlton project. But now you're bringing a lot of that knowledge and expertise, really for the first time, I think, in a big way, into Fort Worth. So talk about the Crescent Fort Worth project and sort of your view of our market and how you made the decision to put that project together.
Well, it's time. I think Fort Worth needs to make bigger, bolder, and I'm referring to our development community, bigger, bolder decisions. You guys have done it in spades up north with everything you've done around Alliance. You've really thought boldly. I mean, to build an airport in conjunction with the city, it's just, that's a game changer. And in my much smaller way, taking that land in the cultural district, which is so iconic and such a draw for people around the world, we don't have that great place for them to stay in proximity to the cultural district. So I make that commute every day to and from my office downtown, and I kept looking at that piece of land, and I'm like, heck, I know we can do this, and we can do it in a respectful way to the museums. Everyone who had tried it before, they were building things that frankly were ugly and not in keeping with the beautiful architecture that's right at their front door. So I wanted to do something that didn't compete with the architecture, but was respectful to it and totally within the confines of what the museums wanted, and that's what we're doing. So we've got a 200-room hotel, 168,000 feet of office. I'm moving all my offices there. And then we're doing high-end apartments, about 170, 80 of those, which will be, I think, the nicest apartments in the city. And then Canyon Ranch is going to be wedged between the hotel and the multifamily.
Can you talk about, on the apartments, can you talk about rents yet?
Not yet.
Okay.
But I will soon.
Put me on the waiting list.
I will. I'll do that.
Well, I think it's going to be an amazing, you're raising the bar in terms of product quality all across the board in your multifamily piece, in your hotel piece, and in the office piece. And I think, we heard from Cannon talking about the office market. I think setting the bar where you're setting it will hopefully bring others in to follow and build some more quality.
So, and I think it will. I think it will. The real estate business oftentimes is too myopic, and it looks at all the history to say, okay, here's where we need to set our rate because that's where the market is. I like to break that mold. In Houston, Texas, we broke the mold of gross rents. We, Crescent, broke that mold. And we didn't do it in a collaboration with other owners. We just said, we're going to go triple net, period. And I challenged my team to do it. They did it. And now, guess what? The city is triple net in the office sector. Yeah. And so you've got to break the mold. And so we set a rate on our office, for example, that a lot of people, some in this room, told me, John, you're not going to be able to get it. And I said, look, it's only 170,000 feet. I think we can get it. Well, I think we could fill up 3 of them. But you've got to build quality.
Right.
Break the mold, as you say.
100%. So let's come into downtown. Most of you know, but some of you may not, that John really, in partnership with Mayor Price, John really was the leader behind convincing Texas A&M to commit to do this major downtown project that has been announced and is now continuing to move forward. So first of all, talk about the A&M project and how you see that evolving, and then let's talk a little bit about downtown and where downtowns in America are, where Fort Worth fits in that. That's kind of a huge question, but sort of start with A&M and then,
Sure.
and then talk downtown.
Well, Mayor Price called me in the middle of the pandemic, I think she's here actually, and said, John, I want to ask you and Elaine Agather to be in charge of this organization we want to create called Fort Worth Now, which will help us get through the pandemic and grow economically coming out of the pandemic. So I naively said yes. My hair was on fire with all my businesses, but you know, I feel a real obligation to the city because I love the city, and it was a small way that I could give back. So I took on that challenge and, you know, recruited a team to create a board, and we actively got engaged on ideas. And as I reflected back, I remembered about a meeting I had with Bobby Adier, who's the dean of the law school. And he had called me and said, hey, John, I want to meet you. This was a couple of years previous. And I want to tell you what we're up to. So I met him. I was really impressed with him. He just had such energy and fire. I refer to him affectionately as a BB in a beer can. He's just got great energy. And I love people with passion and energy. And he told me what was going on with the law school, and I was very impressed. And I thought back on that. So I called Bobby and I said, A, I'd love for you to serve on our board of Fort Worth Now. And B, I want to visit with you about A&M and your position, because they own that extra land. So we literally went to his office, we climbed up on top of the building, we looked around, and for those of you who watched 1883 and the opening scene of Hell's Half Acre, that's Hell's Half Acre.
Yep.
A lot of people don't know that, but that's where it was. And it's an amazing tract of land, and there weren't many things that conflicted with it. You know, you didn't have buildings you're gonna have to tear down, it's just vacant land. So I said, what if we were able to get a broader array of A&M to come and locate on this land? It would be, and build a downtown campus. The one thing, if you look at all the major cities in the US, Fort Worth is the largest city in the US without a Tier 1 research university within its city limits, the only one. There are cities smaller than us that have it. So that would be a game changer for the city. And this is not an expansion of the law school, it's way beyond that. It will be a new law school, but it's going to be a lot more than that. Texas A&M is the largest student body in the nation. A lot of people don't realize that. By the way, I graduated from the University of Texas, but I have a real strong affection to A&M and a lot of respect. They control and manage 8 state agencies. The only university that does anything like that, the Office of Emergency Management, is managed by A&M. And guess what? They're going to be moving that to this downtown campus. People from all over the world will come to downtown Fort Worth to get trained on emergency management because they're best in class. And it's going to have all kinds of other things we could talk about for a long time that are going to be housed there. And we've got a big kind of press thing going this afternoon to talk about some of that.
You know, we're partnered with TTI, which is Texas Transportation Institute, in the work we're doing around mobility innovation. So I've had a chance to look, I mean, that's just one arm of the A&M system.
Yeah.
But I've had the chance to really look inside the tent at the power of that infrastructure that they bring. And you just look across all their skill sets and their schools and their expertise. I mean, it's like 4 corporate relocations to downtown in one.
Yeah.
And then you get the institutional brand on top of that. I think it's just incredible.
It's incredible. In the middle of the pandemic, you know, I called John Sharp and said, John, got this idea. I want to come down and talk to you if you're willing to do it. He said, absolutely. You know, we'll assemble the team. I'd never met him. Betsy knew him. And so Mayor Price and I flew down in the middle of the pandemic. I mean, and he brought himself and an entire team of all the top people within the university into a conference room, and we went through a presentation. And he leaned over at the end of the presentation and says, I love this, I'm gonna do it.
And when he says he's going to do it, he's
He
gonna
does,
do it.
he is a no-nonsense guy.
Plus, he's a fun guy to be around.
He's a blast.
Fun guy to be around. Okay, but beyond the A&M project, which I think is a huge catalyst, not just for the whole city, but it's also a catalyst for sort of helping pull a development trend towards the southern end of downtown. But talk about, you know, I do a lot of work with you and with others in the city around sort of trying to help craft our economic development strategy. And there's pockets of tremendous development activity all around the city. I mean, the cultural district and what you're doing and what's happening along the Uptown Corridor, I call it our Uptown Corridor. Alliance, obviously, near South Side, out to the west, Walsh, Clear Fork. I mean, there are major development activity nodes all around the city, but there's constant criticism and negativity around the core CBD. So what do we do to sort of refresh and move forward?
Well, we can't control the decisions of every owner, but what we can do, I think this A&M deal, Panther Island, these are gonna be game changers. A&M is gonna bring, through their expertise and through sheer inertia, a lot of corporate relocations. I'm working on 2 right now, one of which I somewhat control because it's one of our portfolio companies that potentially move from the northwest here. They want to move the entire company here and locate right adjacent to the university. And the reason is because the university creates software engineers that they need, and they have a very tough time accessing that talent. And so A&M, you know, I hooked them up with A&M, and they wined and dined this company, and lo and behold, you know, they're in love. I mean, this is going to happen. So there's going to be many more of those. Alcon has been incredible at talking and being in these meetings with me with A&M to get them to bring aspects of the university that can benefit Alcon. Lockheed, Bell Helicopter, AT&T, Elbit Systems, your whole team. It's been amazing the way the city can collect itself and gather around a great opportunity like this. So this is going to be a game changer. That inertia will affect all of downtown.
Yeah, I agree.
It's just going to force it to happen.
I agree. Do you think with assets like A&M and having that sort of educational institution there and the talent that attracts, do you think those are the things that cities need today in any sort of central business to draw? Because corporate America's, without support infrastructure, they're not coming to downtowns anymore.
Yeah, and it's more than just graduating university graduates, you know, with a 4-year degree. It's job training.
Right.
And they are really, really big on job training. So they're already collaborating with Tarrant County College on job training programs where they can collaborate. So to create not 4-year degrees, but 2-year degrees, 1-year degrees, to go do things that our companies need.
Do you think we need to, so you're here, obviously, Hillwood's here, there's a handful of other developers here, but do you think to sort of light the fire, we need to be more proactive in bringing in more development expertise to our city?
More development expertise, more quality, more creativity. What we don't need is a bunch of additional just Me Too suburban buildings.
Right.
We need creativity.
Yeah. And there's a small group of very high quality developers around the country that I think if we told our story to them, and you and I don't want to create a competition, but in my mind, that's not competition. That's enriching our whole marketplace, and activity breeds activity, and we need more. We need more.
Absolutely. I've worried, and our team is worried every time a new hotel's announced over in Dallas to compete with the Crescent and the Ritz-Carlton. Well, guess what? Every time they come online, our rates go up, our occupancy goes up.
Right.
It's business,
Well, I mean,
it's inertia.
We're going to do a Four Seasons on Turtle Creek, so
Yeah, I wish
because you've created a marketplace that works.
Yeah, and we'll help each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And we need a Four Seasons a core city, a central city Four Seasons.
Yes.
In this marketplace. Okay, so let's just sort of get towards the end by letting you talk. I'd like to hear a little bit more about the things that you're doing at Goff Capital outside of real estate, sort of the fun stuff. And I don't know if you're still as engaged as you were a while back, but esports. So you and the Jones family have partnered in this esports phenomenon. If that's still going on, I'd love to hear a little bit more.
Yeah, it is going on. We recently merged our esports collection of teams that we have into a public company called GameSquare. And so the Jones family and ourselves are the largest owner of that public company. And it's small today, but it's a very smart organization that's growing rapidly. We're soon going to be listed on the NASDAQ. We've been listed in Canada because GameSquare has been a Canadian company, but we've relocated them to the Star up in Frisco. And it's a very interesting segment. Love my investment there, and we're very active. My son Travis is on the board of the company, and one of the representatives of the Jones family is on the board. So it's been a wonderful collaboration with the Cowboy organization. So that's one business. We're in a lot of people don't know, but we're in the energy business. We have an office here in Fort Worth. We're based in Houston, but Crescent Energy that you mentioned earlier is, we're about a $5 billion public energy business, and I'm chairman of that. We had this wonderful opportunity to merge our smaller energy company with all of the energy assets of KKR, and that happened and was closed a little over a year ago, and so we're off and running, trying to grow.
Two more things I'd like you to talk about. Canyon Ranch. I mean, what a incredible business, and you've been there
Been
from
an
the
investor
beginning.
for a long time.
Yeah. So how do you grow that? How do you grow that business?
Well, we have two resorts now, one in Tucson, one in Lenox, a third that we recently opened in Woodside, California, and then we're at the Venetian in Vegas with the largest spa in the world, about 130,000 square feet.
I'm going to be in Vegas this weekend. Maybe I should.
You should go.
Go.
Well, let me know. And we've got, we're building here an urban club that will be part of our development here. It'll be about 30,000 square feet. So we're growing in a number of ways. We've announced, I bought 600 acres with 2 miles of Lake Travis frontage, and we're going to build a Canyon Ranch resort there on Lake Travis. It's in final design now. We'll break ground this year. Fortunately, we've got the financing. It's about a $250 million project, and it's going to be amazing. So it'll be a state-of-the-art Canyon Ranch. And this is all about where wellness, healthcare, and recreation sort of merge together.
Which is
And
driving a lot of.
And I've just recently gotten control of the whole business. I bought everyone out about a couple of years ago, and so I'm in position now to really grow it, and we're going to do that through these urban centers, through a connected digital system, as well as additional resorts.
And then one last topic I wanted to cover. You and your wife, Cammie, are very involved in a number of different philanthropic endeavors, but one that I think is so important and moving forward is the Medal of Honor Museum in Arlington. So can you talk a little bit about that project, why it's important to you, and where it stands, and what it'll mean?
Well, we were introduced to this project by the Jones family, and they came to us because it's being built right across from AT&T Stadium. And they had committed $25 million to it, and they were looking for a big commitment from me, which, at least in our size, we did. And I tell you, it's one of the most incredible things that I've ever been involved in. First of all, I was stunned that these brave Americans who have sacrificed for all of us, there was nowhere to recognize them within the entire United States. There's not even a monument. So there was this effort to build a museum. It will probably end up being called something other than museum because it's going to be a learning center. But there's also going to be a monument in Washington, and we're raising about $250 million roughly, and the number keeps changing a bit, 230 to 250. We're at 185 million today. We've broken ground. We had a huge ceremony. It's going to be magnificent. And of the, I think it's 64 living recipients of the Medal of Honor, through this process, we've had multiple dinners at our home and at the Joneses' home, and I've now met, I think, over half of them, and each one has such an incredible story, and these stories need to be preserved, and they need to be shared with young people as an element of sacrifice, the importance of our military, what it does for our country. There's just so much to be learned, and that's the purpose of this, is to share that with not only the nation overall, but specifically young people.
Well, I think it's...
And it's going to be beautiful.
And I've been to a couple of the presentations, and you know, when you hear them speak and you hear the story, you can't help it. You want to be supportive.
I mean, it's brought me to tears many times.
No, I teared up both times. Okay, well, we are, I don't even have an idea where we are. We're well past our whatever the time was, but hopefully that covered a pretty broad section of topics, and you know, I just want to thank you for everything you're doing in our city, both in front of the camera and behind the camera. Really, really critical to have leaders like John Goff in Fort Worth. I look forward to the next decade, because I think we've got an incredible opportunity to take this market and lift it up. And thanks again for your time today, and thanks for everything you're doing for our city.
Thank you, but you're an amazing guy, and what you and Ross and the whole team do for this city are amazing. And the city leadership here is second to none. It's just, it's a wonderful group of people that are so proactive and engaged, and great ideas, smart. We got a lot of fun things ahead of us.
Well, let's go.